Welcome, everyone. Aloha and good afternoon. So my name is Christy Covella. I am the director of the Center for Indo-Pacific Affairs at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. And today I'm so pleased to be able to welcome you to a talk called Fishing in Troubled Waters. And this event is co-sponsored by the Center for Indo-Pacific Affairs, the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, and the Department of Asian Studies at the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. And we're so happy to have Dr. Hongzhou Zhang today from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Dr. Zhang is an assistant professor. His main research interests include regional and global resources conflicts and governance, game theory, discourse analysis, and governance of emerging technologies. He's done a lot of wonderful work on a wide range of topics, and he's the author or editor of 3 different books: Securing the Rice Bowl, China and Global Food Security, China and Transboundary Water Politics in Asia, and China's Global Quest for Resources, Energy, Food, and Water. So we're going to have a presentation today of about 30 to 35 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion moderated by our own Dr. Shuxian Luo from the University of Hawaii at Mānoa in the Department of Asian Studies. We're so happy to have you with us today, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. So without further ado, I will hand the floor to Dr. Zhang for his presentation.
All right. Okay, I hope you can see the screen. Thank you so much, Christy, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you, Shuxian, for the invite. Hey, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be here. Today, the topic of my talk is about avoiding the fishing crisis in the disputed water in the South China Sea, and then I will try to show how the game theory can be applied and can be applied to help us understand the complexities of fishing issues, fishing conflicts, overfishing in the South China Sea, and potentially how the model can be revised and extended, and in a way that can help us, let's say, addressing or avoiding the fishing crisis in the disputed waters. Okay, with that, let's start with a brief agenda for my today's talk. So I will start with about describing what is going on in the South China Sea fishery and then introduce the prisoner dilemma model, explore and talk about its limitations, and then explore extended game theoretical model and discuss what is this all means for managing fishery resources in the South China Sea. And then I will wrap up with some policy recommendations. As we all have probably heard, and the South China Sea is represent as one of the most important marine environment, or is actually one of the most diverse in terms of marine diversity, one of the most important areas in terms of marine diversity. And as you can see from the figure on your right, it shows like annual catch from marine fisheries in the South China Sea, with about, let's say, at current rate, over 12 million tons of fishery catch is contribute about over 10% of global total fishery catch, right? Providing livelihood and food to millions of people around the region. However, the problem here is that it's facing a massive fishing crisis. And the below statistics shows is because of overfishing, pollution, and climate change, there is serious issue of depletion of fish stocks. And then according to different studies, right, and one analysis is that business as usual scenario, the marine species could further deteriorate by nearly 60% by 2045. And in a report prepared by a group of scientists from China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, that if the fish stocks in the South China Sea were in a grave danger of collapsing unless all countries work together to protect it. So this brings us to what scholars has usually, as often terms and tragedy of commons, is a situation that everyone takes what they can, assuming it's inexhaustible, but is actually, in fact, it isn't. So the tragedial common situation is often formalized through a prisoner dilemma game. And in the following slides, right, by visiting and challenging some of the key assumptions of prisoner dilemma, and I'll show you how we can find the pathways to better manage these waters and to avoid and potentially avoid the collapse of fisheries in South China Sea. This brings us to the conceptual framework we are applying to understand the potentially solved by the prisoner dilemma. So just imagine, right? You have two fishermen, each thinking about catching the last few fish in the sea. They both go for it, and the disaster struck. If neither of the fish populations can recover, given the dominant strategy for both of them is to overfish, as a result, over time, there will be no fish left. This is what is being playing out in big time in the South China Sea among millions of fishers. For decades, scholars were keen to find out solutions to avoid the tragedy of commons, which unfold in different resource domains and different communities and various levels, has been focusing on analyzing the key assumptions of this dilemma game. And through changing or altering one or two or some of these assumptions, let's try to see how we can prevent the suboptimal outcomes and foster cooperations among competing resource users. Some of the key assumptions for the prisoner dilemma game include rationality of players, no communication, no central authority, so on and so forth. And over the years, there has been notable improvement or contribution to the field. Some scholars have found out that if, let's say, the PD game is played repeatedly, in other words, in the case of an iterated PD game, there will be higher chance of cooperations. And similarly, when the prisoner dilemma game is played by the entire population repeatedly, the possibility of cooperation is affected by the social viscosity, which include like a direct reciprocity, indirect reciprocity, kin selection, group selection, as well as other factors like population size, noise, uncertainties, etc. And building on this research, I believe there are still two overlooked limitations of the classic PD game, which when it is applied in the context of South China Sea. And let me just dive into details. The first is that contrary to the traditional community-based common pool resource, where resource users care about resource, or they're going after resource. In the context of South China Sea, the fisher's real motivation is about maximizing the monetary value derived from fish rather than fish itself. And the second is that there's no clear boundaries for the large scale and global commons as in the context of fisheries in South China Sea. And allow me to expand these 2 points further with examples. So as you the figure from the sea around us shows, right, for decades, industrial fishing has already become the dominant form of fishing in the South China Sea in terms of total catch output and substance fishery. Substance fishery basically means that fishermen catch fish for food for the families, as only represents a very small tiny fraction of overall fishing activity in the South China Sea at the moment. So what does that mean? There are two implications. The first is that the monetary value of the fishing is not only affected by the supply side, which means right, the amount of fish caught, but also the demand side for fishery products. And when the money is ultimate goal that motivates the fishers, the analysis of the behaviors the fishers need to go beyond the particular fish domains to include non-resource sectors. And let's say in the case of South China Sea, fishery sectors are closely interlinked with non-fishing activities. And let me explain a bit more on the impacts of demand side of fish products on the fish values through the very classical wedding example. Over 100 years ago, when the whale oil was widely used to illumination, welding was a thriving global business. In the context of the US, it was a major player around 1880. 1880s, the whaling industry ended to about, it was considered the fifth largest sector of the American economy. However, 50 years ago, the whaling sector was dead. It was basically dead. And Americans' whaling fleet has fallen by 90%. This is largely due to the development of commercial development in petroleum industry as well as vegetable oil, which led to the rapid decline in the demand for whale oil. And moving on to the second limitations, that is the boundary issue. In the context of South China Sea, there's no clear boundaries on several different dimensions to begin with. Given the ongoing territorial dispute and dispute over EEZs, there is even no agreement on where the overlapping claim is. But the fish species like tuna and other high-value commercial species are highly migratory. Second, there are numerous fish species in the same fishing ground. And third, the sectoral boundaries also exist. Fishing has become a very sophisticated business, where you have supplies and transshipment ships, as well as ships that has become specialized in providing services. So what about all means that fishers are regional economic actors. Their operations tend to move from one area to another, from species to species, rather than fixating on particular fish stocks or in particular fishing areas until tragedy happens. And taking into consideration the two limitations we discussed just now, let's now examine how the classical prisoner dilemma game can be or should be extended to a more comprehensive game theoretical approach. So, as I briefly explained, in the classical prisoner dilemma game, fishers are only believed only to have two choices. One is either overexplore or maintain the status quo. However, in the real life situation, fishers can choose not only to overexplore, keep the status quo, but also they have other options. The two options that I'm going to focus on is exit and move. Again, let me briefly explain what these two options are about with examples. In the traditional or closed communities, social mobility is very limited, which means that resource users or fishers is trapped either in terms of occupational choice or their geographical boundaries. However, as economic development, market penetration, industrialization, globalization, as an urbanization, various opportunities, the venues for occupational, geography, social mobility has been opened. Although the experience varies from country to countries or from society to societies, the general trend is that with higher level of social and economic mobility brought by economic development, people tend to exit the resource extraction industry, including agriculture, mining, forests, and fisheries. As more and more resource users and fishers is the focus of our today's talk, the common pool resource of fishing problems that occurs in many regions or areas tend to disappear as exploration rate falls below the maximum extractable level. The table here shows the rapid change in the Japanese and South Korean fishing sectors. As you can see, with economic development, number of fishing vessels and fishermen has declined notably, as well as this has led to the share of, let's say, declines in marine catch employment and also marine catch output as more fishers exit the sector, which then contributes to the recovery of fish stock in their own waters. Now let's talk about the move option. It includes moving from fishing operation in one fishing ground to others, or targeting different fishing species, or moving to other parts of, let's say, fish supply chains, or fishery supply chains. All this has been adopted widely by fishers around the world, including fishermen in the South China Sea region. Let's just use another example that outside the region first. In the context of the European Union, more than 25% of fish harvested by European fishing fleet are actually taken out taken from, let's say, other country EEZs or high seas through different sort of arrangement. And through this outsourcing, moving their fishery operations elsewhere, and through imports. European unions or European countries have been able to cut the fish pressures in their own water on their fish stocks by nearly half in the 2020 in the 2000s. And in the context of China, since 1985, right, there has been notable structural shift in the country's fishing industries as more and more fishermen expand their operation hours in the offshore waters and in the disputed water in the South China Sea and East China Sea, as well as there has been a rapid expansion of the distant water fishing fleet in the high seas and in other countries, EEZs, again, through different sort of arrangement. Not only geographically, facing diminishing returns, fishers can also move up and down the fishing value chains and target different species. Take the Chinese fishermen in South China Sea, for example. As fishers expand their operation outward in the offshore waters or in the disputed water in the South China Sea, some of these fishermen has become specialized in providing logistics services to other fishermen, while others only sail to the Spirit Lease to purchase or engage in barter trade from either the Chinese fishers or with fishermen from Vietnam, Philippines, and others. Again, another typical example, and of course, is one of the most damaging, informers of damaging move related to shifting from one fishing species to another fishing species is the harvesting of giant clan sea turtles by the Chinese Taimen fishermen in Hainan province. Since 2012, when there was rising demand or growing demand for rare and aquatic products, such as red corals, giant clams, handicrafts, the price of these giant clams and sea turtles has skyrocketed. As a result, a large number of fishers from Hainan, this particular fishing village called Taimen, who used to catch fish or even began to harvest giant clams and sea turtles in large scale. And this has contributed to devastating impacts on the marine ecologies in the South China Sea, including the disputed waters around the Scarborough shores and others. Okay, with that, this brings us to the extended games regulatory model. As we have discussed in the classic PD game, right, fishers only had two choices. But since we have talked about it, fishers can choose not only to explore, but overexplore, keeping the status quo, but they can also have, let's say, two additional options like exit or move, either in terms of geographies or in terms of species or different value chains or different parts of value chains or move, let's say, targeting a different species, moving to different areas. This has, the addition of these two extra moves, this has made the classic PD game a much more complicated game model, but also significantly expand the opportunities of the odds that the tragedy of commons or the collapse of fisheries that can be avoided. I will not bother you with the tedious details of the assumptions of this extended game theoretical model. Excuse me, and the conditions under which the one of the options will be adopted or deferred. But just to highlight, as compared to the PM, we now have 10 distinct outcomes based on different combination choices of the fishers. And among the 10 outcomes, the tragedy of commons can be avoided, or for the put in a simplest term, in let's say 3/5 of the situation. Only when outcome, let's say H, which is overexplored and overexplored, is expected, tragedy of commons becoming A. The rest of four scenarios, whether the tragedy, in the rest of four scenarios, right, whether the tragedy of commons can be avoided is contingent upon the degree of overall exploitation by a single users. Just now, for the sake of simplicity, it is assumed that it is the one-shot events and effects of ecological feedback as well as other factors such as technology are ignored. However, these assumptions do not hold in real-world situations. Thus, demand some further brief discussions. So, as we talked in the classic PD game, right, there was assumptions about whether a single-shot game or event with the only involves in two features. Once these assumptions are relaxed, the outcome will vary greatly. As in the context of South China Sea, it's definitely not a game played by two fishers. In fact, in contrast, it should be a more iterative game played by hundreds of thousands or millions of fishers. And in this iterative game, it's critical to consider the feedback effect of each fisher's action, as well as the linkage between fishing and non-fishing sectors. And the utility function of choice of each fisher is not fixed. Instead, it is the function of the broad social economic conditions as well as choice made by others. For instance, right, if more fishers choose the exit option, the potential benefit of other fishers who remain in the fishing business or monetary returns will go up. Likewise, there is also a case of diminishing returns for overfishing, as more fishers opt for overexploitation of fish resources in a particular fishing ground. The potential economic returns then diminishes. So what it means is that some of the outcomes we discussed previously, such as outcomes like outcome 1, exit, outcome 2, exit and move, outcome 5, move and move, outcome 8, overexplore and overexplore, will be very unlikely in the real world situations. For instance, the feedback effect of diminishing returns might have put a brake on overexploitations as the returns for overexploitation declines. Some fishers may find exit and move the preferred choices. So ultimately, the tragedy of commons in a particular fishing ground or in the context of South China Sea can be avoided. We are contingent upon the rate of exploitations when the equilibrium is achieved or reached. With a very brief explanation of this extended game theoretical model, let's now talk about what the implications for the fishery management or fishery governance in the South China Sea. The answer is quite straightforward and quite simple. So, to avoid the collapse of fisheries in the South China Sea, we need to encourage more fishers to adopt either exit or move options primarily in terms of increasing the economic returns of non-fishing sectors which are available to the fishers and reduce the potential economic returns of fishing in the area of concerns. And to avoid these two goals, there are again two aspects which need to be addressed. The first is the development paradox, and the second is the crucial role played by some national governments. Let me start with the 5 main points of the paradoxical relationship between development and the fishery governance. The first is that it is critical to create economic opportunities onshore. Economic opportunities in non-fishery sectors offer alternative source income for fishers, which can potentially reduce the fishing pressures in the fishing ground, as in the case of South China Sea. Conversely, a fishing-led development is more likely to exacerbate the fish problem, to bring more pressures on the fish stocks. The second is that the growth of distant water fishing industries could, as in the context of South China Sea, could relieve some of the pressures in the region. Taiwan used to be a very big fish player in the South China Sea, and then when they push for a transition toward distant water fishing, the Taiwan's fishing presence in the South China Sea has shrunk drastically. You have the fish output in the Taiwan's, let's say, fish catch in the South China Sea. It was about 228,000 tons in 1989, and then reduced about 1,500 tons in 2015. Of course, the downside of this is that it tends to outsource the fish pressures elsewhere. As we have heard, right, there was so much complaints and discussions about negative impacts of Taiwan's distant water fishing operations in other parts of the world. Third, the massive amount of fishing subsidies provided by the regional government to drive up the potential economic returns of fishing need to be stopped. And fourth, the returns for fishing remains high, partially on high demands to the returns for fishing tend to remain high. One of the reason or primary reason is due to high demand for seafood. In the context of South China Sea, this is a particular case when we talk about the giant clam with seafood harvesting. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key drivers of contributing is a high demand from consumers for these products. Lastly, what needs to be acknowledged that more developed countries are capable of seeking alternative sources of supplies, either through fish trade, aquaculture, artificial meat, which will help reducing the fishing pressures. And the good news is that this is already happening in the context of China, the world's largest fishing countries, and of course, by far the dominant fishing players in the South China Sea. As you can see from the table here, there has already a major shift in the fishing trade patterns in China. Once the country has always for decades been the largest exporter of fishery, but in 2022, it has turned to net importer. In terms of value, importing more and more fish products from other countries, including some of the Southeast Asian, South China Sea countries like Vietnam, Thailand, which is creating opportunities for corporations, either in terms of fish trade and in other means. And now let's turn to the critical roles played by the subnational government. As previous slide has alluded to, the likelihood of fishermen adopting either move or exit options and the eventual impacts of these options on the fish stocks largely contingent upon the development pathways, towards which subnational actors plays a very important but often overlooked role for two reasons. The first is that throughout the region, the subnational governments has emerged and key economic actors or players in regional and local economic development. Let's take the least likely case of China, for instance. Although China is known by its constitution is a unitary system, but over the years of rapid economic development and decentralization, economic policies such as has been largely decentralized. As a result, local governments is playing very important roles in crafting their own economic development strategies. And the second point is that subnational actors in the South China Sea are playing a critical role in the issue in domains of environmental and fishery governance. Again, let me use an example to illustrate. Regarding the fishing activities in the South China Sea, the Hainan provincial government, local government in China has played a very important role behind in either driving the, let's say, contributing the fishing conflicts and we call as let's say joint sectors, as well as other aspects related to fishery in the context of China. For the single reason that China has long regarded the fisheries as a lifeline in its local economy, the local governments in China has played great emphasis in developing the marine catch sectors as through means like providing enormous amount of subsidies to its fishery operations and even lobbying for central government support for preferential policies. And times it resists or even ignore, let's say, Beijing's South China Sea policies or fishery regulations. And when it comes to joint plans, they played a critical role in encouraging the rapid expansion or development of joint plans handicraft sector from 2012. And with that, please allow me to conclude my talk with a few thoughts on the possible actions to move forward. I think first and foremost, to avoid the collapse of fishery in the South China Sea, we need to promote economic development in non-fishery sectors in coastal regions of the South China Sea countries. And to do that, more emphasis has been placed on the role of the local government and the regional government. The second point is that the regional government of South China Sea countries should cut their distorting fishing subsidies. The third is that our expansion of fish operations, such as distant water fishing or fishery access agreement, could be a partial solution to balance fish pressure and large geographical scales. The fourth point is that alternative channels of fish supplies, right? So farm fish or fish trade should be promoted. And fifth point, composting of dying plants and endangered species, the demand side management will be critical. And perhaps not just related to the endangered species, by shifting more to a plant-based diet or less consumption of fish, we all can perhaps contribute to sustainable fisheries, not just in the case of South China Sea, but globally. I will stop here and look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Hongzhou, for such a fascinating presentation. So I'll just start off with some questions from myself. One is you talk about distant water fishing as a possible partial solution to what you discuss as a looming tragedy of commons in fishing crisis in South China Sea. But would that inadvertently create another set of new problems? Because as we have already seen that there have been emerging issues especially between countries with fairly large distant water fishing fleet like China, like Japan, and with countries in more distant regions like in Africa, like in America. How to reconcile using distant water fishing as a partial solution? Is there any way that you can strike a better balance between these two, like relieving the fishing crisis in South China Sea versus smooth out the distant water fishing sector as in a more environmental and ecological, more sustainable way? And also, my second question is, when we talk about especially controversies, disputes in maritime space, we talk about divisibility and indivisibility of usually territories are considered as more indivisible because some kind of symbolic values are attached to this kind of disputed territory, so that populations on both sides, on almost sides of disputants, will consider as detest to any possibility of compromising on sharing a territory with other disputants. But that is less likely the case with more divisible resources like fish, like oil and gas in disputed area, where disputants can really sit down and talk about sharing and joint production, even without necessarily settling their territorial and boundary disputes in the first place. But how come the fishing issue, like as you discussed in your prisoner dilemma, seems to be so complicated and difficult to find to be a low hanging fruit for for countries in South China to really sit down and share resources without necessarily finally settling their boundary and territorial disputes in the first place? So I'll stop with the first two questions and see if others from the audience have questions.
Let me address first a bit more. Okay. I will try. Let me just quickly address these two excellent questions. The first, with regard to distant water fishing's potential as a partial solution, I completely understand this is quite a controversial statement, and as I explained in the slides, right, as in the case of Taiwan, so it has been developing distant water fishing as sort of alternatives, right? As sort of transition move for its own fishing industries, and as the good side is that its presence in the distant water fishing in the South China Seas as well as its own EEZs has declined notably, which contribute to recovery of fish stocks to a certain extent. But the problem, the downside, is that it outsources fish pressures to other countries. The same thing is happening in China, and of course it happened to many other countries that who has followed this particular pathway from US to European Union to Japan, South Korea. What I'm saying here is that when we look at the global level, right, it's not all, let's say, fishing grounds has been overexploited. There still exist, let's say, a few areas that you still have abundance in fish stocks. So what I'm suggesting, right, this has right, from a much larger geographical scale, by moving some overcapacity in the areas that has already over fishing or experiencing serious problem of declining fish stocks, to places where the catch rate is still beyond the maximum extractable level. This can contribute to the sustainability of fisheries at large scale. But of course, if this is mismanaged, as is the case in many countries, distant water fishing fleet, notably China, it can create far more problems. The second point about the controversies, right? I think I have similar, let's say, questions or may face a similar doubt about this as well. For many years, right, we have been talking, right, since solving the territorial dispute is difficult, right? Let's start with something easy, right? Fishery. Right? How hard is for us to cooperate to achieve some sort of agreement on fisheries? But it turned out to be very, very difficult, as we have observed in the South China Sea. There has been a lot of attempts by different by countries and also at regional level to foster fishery cooperations. But very little progress has been made, right? At the bilateral levels, there has been some sort of provisional agreements between China and Philippines, China and Vietnam, on different scale, China and Vietnam, and of course among them. But the result is quite disappointing. I think to me, I would say one of the most striking factors that contribute to this predicament is the fact that there's simply too many fishers in the South China Sea, and too many people in the region depend on seafood as source of income and source of proteins. This is, I think, this fundamental fact is major factor that because the pressure is simply too high. The fish pressure is simply too high, and also there has been rising demand for fishery products for different reasons, make it very difficult for each other countries to compromise on certain issues. Okay, yeah.
Great. Since we have two questions coming from the audience, so the first question is, do you see NGOs as the only actor able to push for those policy changes among the competing nations? NGOs such as IMF or World Bank. Just a quick correction to this question. IMF and World Bank are intergovernmental organizations. So do you see any role for international organizations, be them intergovernmental governmental organization or NGOs, play any role, or at both global level and regional level? Do you see any role for them? And can they fund like economic development away from fishing and into sustainable aquaculture or industry? Like, can they provide some financial assistance to accelerate the shift away from the fishing sector to help relieve the pressure on fishing in South China Sea? And the second question is how the dynamics and role of regional organization. I think that's similar to the first question. They ask about actors beyond just state actors. Can become finding potential.
Great. Thank you so much for the wonderful question. Let me just begin with the NGO question. I think certainly NGO has a role to play, a very important role in trying to helping avoid the fishing crisis in the South China Sea. I think one of the effort I admire most among let's say so many different NGOs that involved in this is humanitarian dialogue. And they have been very active and they have been doing wonderful works But if you remember the first slide, the second slide, this report, joint report produced by the group of scientists from China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Right, this is the effort facilitated and led by the humanitarian dialogue. So they have been trying so hard to bring in different stakeholders, from scientists, from Coast Guard, and the government officials engaging in different forms of cooperations, and they have produced wonderful results. Science, I think one of the key problem, apart from the fact I mentioned that, right, simply too many, the pressure is demand side pressure, or let's say too many fishermen, too many fishing vessels operating in the South China Sea, is that the region has been, despite being the fact is one of the most important fishing ground in the world, the statistics or the basic research, like how many fishers are there, how many fishing vessels are there, all these data of fishing, let's say, fish stocks of different species. This key information of scientific research has been lacking. There have been, of course, individual countries' effort to conduct scientific, studies or research on different areas, but at the regional level, very limited information is available. So one of the major frustrations for me have been working on these issues of South China Sea fisheries for many years, that I still don't know how many fish. So there's no agreement on the single fact that how many fish vessels are operating there. The number actually varies from let's say 20 or 30, so a few 100,000 to over 1 million vessels, and then also in terms of total catch, right? So that's why for scientists, for these NGOs to work using different methods, different technologies, and they're providing the basic facts, basic statistics, tell us what is really going on here. Will be critical. We will lay the critical foundations for other actors, right, to work on it. I think, and also, like, has been cited a few figures, right? These figures, I think, very, very important source of information for fisheries in South China. They are produced by Sea Arona, so group of marine scientists from Canada has been doing wonderful works in this area, and it's a very important contribution to the field. The second point is about development and culture. I think, if I remember correctly, it's about agriculture or other channel economic development, right? Shuxian.
Agriculture, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that has been, a move that has been strongly encouraged, not just by China. I think that it has been, the UN has an initiative encouraging like blue economy, something like that, to expand agriculture as an alternative of providing, a more affordable and also more affordable, protein, a source of protein or source of seafood as compared to wildly caught seafood as well. Yeah, and also to relieve the pressure on the maritime ecology system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me just cover a bit more here. So I think if you look at the entire transformation of China's fishing industry, the greatest transformation is a remarkable shift from marine catch, fishery catch, inland catch, to the fish farming, right? So fish farming can right now contribute about, I think, 80% of the entire fish production in China. So it makes China by far the biggest, let's say, country in terms of agricultural production. If I remember the number correctly, it should be somewhere around 60% of the global total. And of course, apart from China, you have other Asian countries have been developing or investing heavily in fish farming and alternative source of seafood, right, to relieve the pressures in the South China Sea and in their own EEZs and inshore waters, which of course is a very important channel. But the problem here is that it depends on what kind of species basically you have been cultivating, right? So there has been a lot of issues related to agriculture as well. But let's say if you develop commoner's fish, right, a high valued marine species, you typically still need to rely a lot on fish meal or fish oil in your feed. This is contributing to the expanding of demands for, let's say, for trout fish. So there has been a lot of studies about how the rise of agriculture contributing to the devastating impacts, right? Because a lot of fishing vessels can specialize in harvesting trout fish and juveniles fish for seafood, to feed the fish rather than for direct human consumption. And because when you start targeting the small and juvenile fish, right, it basically has made even more damaging impact on the entire marine ecosystem. So there has been, right now, I think what is going on is that there has been ongoing effort in terms of developing alternative source of feed through soybeans and other approaches. Hopefully work out, right? I think definitely aquaculture fish farming should be promoted, but depending on what kind of species we talk about. The third is about dynamic regional actors. There has been a lot of discussions in the South China Sea about the need to establish a regional fishery management organization. Similar organization that exists in many, in a lot of other areas, especially in the high seas, that has been doing wonderful works in terms of protecting marine species. But the problem here is very difficult, as given the current political dynamics and also intensifying border dispute, territorial disputes among common states. I think to me, it's nearly impossible to have similar, let's say, regional organizations to be established. But of course, we have other regional organizations like ASEAN. We have specific focus on fishery as well. But it's mainly at ASEAN participation levels and with limited impacts.
Great. And we have two more questions coming from the audience. How can policymakers effectively address sustainability in South China Sea fisheries, considering options like promoting economic development in non-fishery sectors, promoting alternate seafood channels, and managing the demand for endangered species? Another question is specifically on IUU fishing. So for those who don't know what this acronym stands for, it refers to illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing activities. So it becomes it's looming as a serious problem for fishing activities in South China Sea, more broadly in the Indo-Pacific as well. So the question is, do you believe a regional IUU fishing enforcement needs to be handled by countries with more capacity, like Singapore's IFC and Thailand's MECC, as the guiding light in the sea? Or does local IUU enforcement need to be handled at the domestic level only? I think the two, questions.
Repeat the first question?
So first question is, how can policymakers more effectively addressing the sustainability issues in the South China Sea fisheries, consider policy options like promoting economic development in non-fisheries sectors, promoting alternative seafood channels, alternate seafood channels, and managing the demand for endangered species?
Okay, all the policymakers can do that. Okay. Let me just share a few thoughts on this, right? I think there has been because if you look around the South and sub-national level from region to region, right, you can see different economic pathways, right? Even among, let's say, traditional fishing villages in terms of economic development priorities or how they manage the economic transition. Some of them as basic focus on this, let's say, in the case of South Hainan. So let's say in the context of China, you have three provinces, South China Sea provinces, Hainan, Guangdong, and Guangxi. Each has very different, let's say, economic pathways and also different policy with regard to fishery, right? Guangdong is a major player in terms of agriculture development. Guangxi is doing very big in terms of distant water fishing. But on the other hand, Hainan is marine fishery, which is making it a major player in terms of contributing to the fishing crisis or fishing conflicts. But it's not just the South China, right? In other different regions of different South China Sea countries, we do see that there are local variations in terms of economic development pathways. Some is doing quite well, some are not. So this why that's the reason why I'm highlighting that it's not just the national government that policies that we should focus on. The local government policies and initiative matters, because even in the same country, right, you do see very big variations. And in terms of alternatives and fish, I think what is, let's say in the context of Indonesia, one of the major drive is like what is, instead of focusing solely on catch fish in terms of primary sector, right, the first stage, and then they focus a lot also on fish processing industry. They're trying to encourage foreign investors to set up fish processing plant. So instead of just catch fish and sell, you basically obtain very little economic values from this. But then they're encouraging more investors to establish fish processing plants. You can make the transfer to process the fish to high valued products, which then creates, let's say, more economic opportunities for the fishing communities. And then in a way that will contribute, many of them encourage them to adopt, let's say, move exit options, reducing the direct pressures. And also once the number of fishermen reduce, right, like the political pressure on the government will be lower, right? Because one of the key, I think, primary concerns for many of local governments when it comes to signing bilateral or regional fishery agreements is about its potential impacts on the employment. It's a very sensitive issue. So I think once, right, you have other economic opportunities that have been created, like even in the same in different stages of fish supply chain or in other sectors, and reducing the number of fishing vessels, the direct fishing employment, the political side of pressure can be reduced as well. I think the second question about IUU fishing or whether the regional effort is feasible in the context of South China Sea, I think is a great idea, but again, it is given what is going on right now, fishery issues, and there's so much politicized and securitized. I don't think it will happen. I think there was even the reverse is happening, right? Because once fishermen is involved in the disputed waters, IUU fishing or whether they have been engaging in illegal fishing activity became a minor concern for the government. But this is a particular case, right? You have in the context of China and Philippines, right? You have Chinese fishermen as well, and the Filipino fishermen both are engaging in sort of, let's say, harvesting or poaching of endangered species, but the state simply doesn't care. So when the narrative, overall narrative is that there have been this, either is the trespassing by the foreign fishermen or poaching by the other countries crossing their own EEZs, or is by the other country harassing their own fishermen. Ignoring the fact, overlooking the fact that many of these fishermen have been actually engaged in illegal fishing activities.
And they will spin this kind of IE fishing activities as something like patriotic act, right? In inserting their own country's claims in the disputed areas.
Yeah. The fishermen are very smart, right? They also
they can capitalize. Right? They can always capitalize on the national government stance, right? So we have time for two more questions. So last two questions. What are the urban planning implications of this fishing tensions? How can planners address the ramifications of fishing pollution? And second question is, do you think technology in the private sector will reduce South China Sea conflicts, such as ECTD? I don't know what that means, but maybe broadly, about technology in the private sector, would that help reducing the fishing conflicts in the South China Sea?
Well, I think the first question about urban planning implications of fish transition on
urban planning, the ramification of urban planning, urbanization for fishing prices.
Okay. I think this is again one of the major drivers for I think at least in the context of China for the rising demand for fishery products. Right. So if you look at right, mainly the country as big as China, for many in the past, right, those who consume fish basically are from especially seafood, right, coastal regions, right. Yeah, of course, you have access to seawater to have direct access to. But now with rapid economic, let's say, development, urbanization, the diet of these inland provinces and also those peasants, farmers in the villages has been, let's say, shifted as well. So you do have rising demand for in inland provinces and also in the rural areas for seafood that didn't exist in the past. So as a result, they're creating additional demand for seafood and then more pressures for fish operations in different parts of the world, or in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea. And also against another case this is related to what the fish farming or agriculture we talk about. Right? So as I previously mentioned, agriculture became the dominant source of, let's say, fish protein for the consumers. But with rising, let's say, income, and also the growing concern about safety of some of the farm fish, there were several scandals in the past, and then the wealthy consumers began to are now willing to pay a much higher price for the so-called much higher premium for the marine catch, which is considered safer and healthier. So again, this is the complication, the linkage between agriculture and fish farming, agriculture and marine catch is much more complicated. And then the second point about technology, I think I did not have a chance to talk more about it, but I think this is again there's no straight answer to that. Technology can be a wonderful tool in terms of solving some of the problem we have, but then it's also unaware, right? It can be a problem as a contributing factor to overexploitation as well, right? Consider what the fishing vessel we have, all the technology we have right now, this modern fishing fleet as compared to, let's say, 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. Because once you have built bigger and better ships with more technologies, it's much easier for them to find, much quicker for them in terms of catch rate, and also in terms of the ability to sail even further. But on the other hand, you do have some very developments in certain field, like image. I think the fish image, if I remember correctly, that was a wonderful development in terms of how you can basically tell what kind of species are on shores, right? So one of the problems is that if you want to target a particular protection of particular species, you really have to know how much this particular species has been caught by the fishermen. Catching or no keeping is very challenging and costly for fishermen. As a result, even in many countries, you have regulations requiring fishermen to do that, but it's very difficult to be implemented. So there has been wonderful works by the NGOs and tech companies trying to help bring in new technologies to reduce the complexities of basically keep tracking, recognizing different kinds of species that have been caught, and also other sort of technology, like Singapore has been developing culture meat, where you can develop artificial proteins. If that can become commercialized in large scales, we don't have to fish, or don't need the fishermen don't have to go out there to fish anymore, because depending on how much we're willing to, the consumer side challenge is still there. All right, with that, thank you so much.
Thank you again for this very interesting, fascinating discussion on the fishing issues in the South China Sea. And now let's bring back Christy for a few announcements.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang, for that very interesting presentation. I mean, I think you really did a wonderful job highlighting all of the complexities involved in fishing and how it's interrelated with so many different aspects of regional governance, environment, sustainability, economic incentives. And so you really gave us a lot to think about. And certainly this is an issue that has captured the attention of policymakers in the region and all around the world because it has a lot of implications for developments elsewhere. So I can't thank you enough for that. And thank you, Dr. Luo, for arranging this talk and for making it possible to have Dr. Zhang with us today. Many of our students are online and listening to this presentation, and it will also be available online on YouTube afterward. So again, on behalf of the Center for Indo-Pacific Affairs, the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, and the Department of Asian Studies, thank you so much for joining us today. Our next event is going to be on April 11th, which is a Thursday at 12 o'clock p.m. Hawaii Standard Time. And we will have Ilaria Mazzocco from the Center for Strategic and International Studies speaking about environmental security in Asia and China's electric vehicle industry. So we hope that you can join us then. And thank you again and have a good day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.